Okay, so now you're on your next assignment on Tuesday, and we're going to read. We just read pages 18 and 19, so now we're going to go to page 20 through 22, and we are going to answer these questions. And if you listen really close, maybe you can get the answers to these questions, but you have to watch the full video. Okay, let me get my book out. Here we go.
By the time the Stamp Act was supposed to go into effect in November of 1765, flags were being flown at half-mast to mourn the death of liberty. Nobody in America would even distribute the stamps. 4 months later, hoping to restore peace, Parliament finally gave up and got rid of the hated taxes. This troubled King George, who still thought the taxes were fair, but he signed the repeal anyway. British merchants were delighted to get their lost customers back, and all of America celebrated. Well, the story could have ended right there, but of course it didn't. To show they weren't afraid to tax the colonies, Parliament started demanding even more taxes. Patriot leaders in Massachusetts and Virginia made polite protests to the king, but politeness didn't help one bit. King George...
We're going to stop there for a minute. So then, down here, we have Charles Townsend, and he's the Treasurer of Parliament. So, this guy down here, he works for King George III, and he has to do with all of the money. And he's saying, I dare tax America. I will. That means he wants to tax us. And guys, it's important. I didn't in the last video, but to go back and read these little speech bubbles, because they really do help you understand the text better. But just for the sake of time, I don't want to make this video an hour long. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so the first question on your assignment says, what happened as a result of people having different perspectives on taxes? So let's go back up here. So this question means, what happened as the result of people having different perspectives? So when these taxes came out, some people liked it, some people didn't. So how did the colonists react? Well, the colonists, it says right here, according to page 19, so I could say according to page 19, many colonial merchants refused to buy British goods. And then I'm going to tell what page it is. So I'm going to put in parentheses page 19. Okay, what else happened? It says that groups such as the Sons of Liberty, it talks about the Sons of Liberty on this page somewhere. Let's see. Okay, maybe it doesn't talk about them specifically, but in general, groups of colonists, the Sons of Liberty were a group of colonists that were very radical, which means they did things. Oh, yes, it talks about the Sons of Liberty up here, does it not? Yes, it talks about the Sons of Liberty up here. So the Sons of Liberty, they did all these horrible things. I'm sorry if you hear my dog. He just came down here. They did all these things in response to the taxes. So the Sons of Liberty, they protested in many ways by writing pamphlets, preaching against taxes, wrecking the home of the governor, burning the stamps, and flying flags at half-mast to mourn the death of liberty. So they did all of those things. That's another way that people reacted to having different perspectives on taxes. So there are some other things that you can find in your book about how people reacted. So the next question says, why didn't the conflict end when the Sugar Act and Stamp Act were repealed? How did the colonists react? So it says here that the story could have ended right there, but of course it didn't. To show they weren't afraid to tax the colonies, Parliament started demanding even more taxes. So the taxes later, because people were so upset, they weren't buying things from Great Britain. So to show that the taxes finally got canceled. But then Great Britain got a little bit mad, or more so, King George III got pretty mad, and he said that I'm not afraid of you. I'm going to tax you even more. So then Parliament started demanding even more taxes, and things just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then patriot leaders, which are a patriot is a person who in the colonies that fought for what they believed in, and they made polite protests, but the politeness didn't help. King George III was already just set, and he wanted control over us. So now we're going to continue to read, and we're going to read pages 21, and it looks like that's where we're going to stop today. Actually, we're going to read to page 20. Oh, there it is, page 22. We're going to read pages 21 and 22 really quick. I'm sorry, guys. My dog came down here, and I got a little bit distracted. Okay, here we go.
Believed that God gave noblemen the divine right to rule, and that the colonists had a duty to obey. The British stubbornly informed legislatures in both colonies that they couldn't have any more meetings. So, the colonists stopped trying to be polite. The Virginians, including George Washington, met anyway and banned the sale of all items taxed by Great Britain. Colonists smuggled in untaxed goods from other countries, which was illegal. And they made lots of their own goods instead of buying British ones. A women's group called the Daughters of Liberty supported the cause by weaving their own cloth, making their own ball gowns, and brewing their own Liberty tea out of sassafras flowers. King George was sure that certain gentlemen who pretend to be patriots in Massachusetts were no more than criminals. So he sent a fleet of warships to Boston to make them behave. 700 soldiers wearing fancy uniforms soon paraded up Boston streets with muskets on their shoulders. Whenever they went off duty, many stole, got drunk, and chased women. Some also infuriated worshippers by purposely racing horses, beating drums, and gambling under church windows on Sundays. In March 1770, an angry mob of American rowdies started taunting 8 of King George's soldiers and pelting them with icy snowballs. Then someone threw a lump of wood at a redcoat and knocked him flat. The enraged troops began firing into the crowd, and 5 colonists were killed. Furious Sons of Liberty were quick to label this disaster the Boston Massacre, and it stirred up plenty of anger on both sides. Even so, an American jury later acquitted the British commanding officer and 6 of his men in a fair trial. 2 others were branded on their thumbs and dismissed from the army.
Okay, so the last few questions, this one says, what is divine right, and how did it affect the perspective of King George and the people of Great Britain? So King George believed that God gave noblemen the divine right to rule, and that the colonists had a duty to obey. So King George III, basically what he said is that colonists, they had to obey him because he was doing all of these things for them. And the British told the colonists to stop meeting and trying to protest because they thought the colonists had to obey the king no matter what. Okay, then the next one asks, what did the colonists do next, and how were the Daughters of Liberty involved? So on this page, it gives you information about the Daughters of Liberty. So I want you to tell me in this question what the colonists did next, and how did the Daughters of Liberty, what did they do? Okay, then I believe that's all the questions, actually. It is. Okay, so you were going to answer these questions in complete sentences. This is what they look like. They look like this. So you're going to answer these questions in complete sentences and with text evidence. So You're going to find quotes that support your thinking. You have to do that. That's one of your standards that you have to meet, is that you have to include text evidence. There's plenty of text evidence in your book that tells you what you need to know. So think about what you're going to write down. Go back in your text. Find a quote that supports what you think. And then use transitional phrases like according to page, blah, 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 blah. This is what it says. And make sure if you give me a quote, you put quotation marks around the quote. And you tell me what page you got it from.